Well, this is going to be a lot of fun. I've been a fan of yours, Rachel, for many years. I know you've been at Cointelegraph for a few years now. Before that, with Forbes, you have an incredible resume. You're the senior reporter at Cointelegraph, doing all sorts of important things in our industry. And not everybody knows who you are, but I'd be surprised if most in the NFT.NYC community do not. But for those that are not familiar with you and your work, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do at Cointelegraph.
Sure. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for that kind introduction. So my name is Rachel Wolfson. I'm a senior reporter at Cointelegraph. I've been with the company for almost 3 years now, but I've been reporting on the blockchain and crypto space since 2017. So Ian, as you mentioned, I've been with publications such as Forbes, Huffington Post, Bitcoin Magazine. When I started writing about blockchain in 2017, I was really fascinated by the whole technology side of things. Less so about crypto back then, but the technology side brought me in, and I started writing about it more, becoming more interested in how blockchain could be applied for things like supply chain management. And then over time, I've watched the space grow and expand, and now we're seeing this NFT boom. So I'm really excited to be a speaker at NFT.NYC to talk about the future of NFTs and what we're seeing today.
You have such a great smile, by the way. I just have to say, like, even if you were on mute, people would be like engaged.
Oh, thank you. Well, that makes me, that's great. That makes me feel good because I will be on stage at NFT.NYC smiling.
Well, I know that you cover a lot of events and diverse events, but at our event, I believe you'll be speaking with Ripple's Monica Long, and the title that we're using currently, although things are always changing, is, I really love this. So let me just read this. Breaking the boys club in the culture of crypto, which I think every guy and gal involved would agree that's an important thing. And the subtitle to this is how NFTs are bringing women into Web3. Can you share a bit of your perspective in what is currently in place that is inviting women into Web3 most currently? And then maybe you could share future projection of what types of things are we going to need to do as an industry to continue to open doors for women to come in empowered as leaders or entry, and to have a place at the table, being treated as peers, and really seeing this as a place that they can thrive, bring their creativity and all that they have to this industry for the long run?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a great question. And so I'm going to start off by answering the first part of your question, which is why we are seeing, in my opinion, more women enter the space because of the NFT boom and because of Web3 and the development there. So I think, being in the industry since 2017, we've seen a lot of transitions. And I must admit, with the conferences that I would attend back then, the majority, would be men at the conferences. And still, I mean, the space is male dominated, but with the rise of Web3 and the rise of NFTs, we are seeing more females enter the space. I think a large part of that has to do with the creativity that NFTs kind of allow. So I know a lot of artists, a lot of fashion designers, musicians, writers, all of these people, all of this creative community, they are now getting involved with NFTs. And so as creators, we're seeing men and we're seeing women. We're seeing a lot of women, actually, which is great. I know, Ian, I was telling you before we started the interview that I'm really interested in fashion NFTs. And I think a lot of other women in the space are also interested in that. So I think that's one element that's kind of drawing women in. Also, in terms of artists entering the space, there are so many women artists that are so talented that are now creating NFTs that, I've spoken on panels with them at different events. So we're seeing a large influx now of women entering the space, just because I think that NFTs really allow for that creativity within the crypto sector as a whole. And we didn't see that before, when it was just, blockchain as a technology and cryptocurrencies and digital assets. We've got this whole creative factor there. So in terms of bringing more women in, I think that's a large part of this. And did you want me to answer the second part of your question, which was what we'll see in the future? Or
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you have my undivided attention. You're speaking
Okay.
and I'm listening. So you please keep going.
Okay, yeah, great. So I think just as the space develops, I mean, definitely Web3 is still in development. We're not there yet. But I think that NFTs are going to be a large part of Web3, and they're going to be utilized in these virtual spaces that we're seeing, like Sandbox and Decentraland. Everybody's going to have an avatar. If you've ever, Ian, or anybody listening, if you guys have ever participated in an online event in Decentraland or Sandbox, or if you own land there, or if you just, utilize those spaces, that you usually have an avatar. And then you can even dress that avatar in NFTs, for instance. The properties that you buy in these lands are NFTs. We're now seeing car NFTs. So basically, we're seeing with the rise of Web3, all of these NFT assets in these ecosystems, which is why I think that the NFT community will continue to grow as Web3 develops, and we will continue seeing more female and male participation. I mean, this space opens up a lot of, creativity, and that doesn't exclude any gender, which is great about it. So I think that as Web3 develops, we're going to start seeing more NFTs develop. And with that, we're going to see more people of different genders enter the NFT space.
Often there's a consistent theme, and that is, we need to create more space for women in this industry. Completely agree. One theme I don't see talked about a lot that I personally believe very strongly is not just create open space for women to thrive in Web3, but all the advantages that brings. So I'll give you one personal story. At CES, I asked Marjorie Hernandez from Dematerialized to come on stage and be our closing kind of fireside chat. I'm so glad I did. It sparked a better relationship with her and her team. And it really kind of drew me in to fashion NFTs. I was so thrilled by all that they had accomplished. And I was just captivated by the vision of what could be. So this is one personal example where if Marjorie wasn't there, and if we hadn't developed a friendship, and if she hadn't kind of brought and invited me to see fashion NFTs in the metaverse from her perspective, that would be missing. Even though I'd been around and seen fashion stuff, that was different. And so that's an example of it's her that kind of drew me in and made me lean in. So can you share some of your perspective on the great benefits that will come to everyone in Web3 as more and more women get involved in leadership roles?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great point that you make. I think it's really important to see women like Marjorie, and I know Marjorie, she's great, within these leadership roles, which is another reason why I'm really excited to interview Monica Long at NFT.NYC, because she's in a leadership role at Ripple, and she's been with the company for a very long time. And I know that Ripple and what Monica is doing is really encouraging people of all types to enter the NFT space with their creators fund that they have. But just having women in leadership positions, the crypto space can be intimidating. And I have women ask me all the time how I got involved in the space, how they can get involved. And I think by seeing other women, especially in leadership roles, it kind of creates a more comfortable space and a less intimidating environment for other women to get. Talking to her about fashion NFTs is so easy. She makes everything really, really easy to understand. She knows the space really, really well, which is great to see someone, such as herself explain this new wave of digital fashion. So I think that, having women in those roles is really, really important. And I hope to see more of it moving forward. Another person that really got me involved when it came to digital fashion and NFTs was Megan Casper. And she's a big thought leader in the space when it comes to digital fashion and digital fashion NFTs. She was on the cover of Hot Living recently wearing a Fendi digital fashion. I don't think it was an NFT, but it was superimposed on her on the cover of Fendi, which is, that's pretty groundbreaking. So to see women kind of developing and innovating in this space is really important, especially for other women. I think just for me personally, I feel more comfortable interacting with other women that know the space really, really well. So maybe others agree with me.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I learn more from women in these interviews. Sorry, dudes. I think like most guys. And so it's kind of like just we're saying similar things. But when I get a chance to talk with you and others, I get an opportunity to learn. And I think that's a benefit for those that see this conversation. Yesterday I was talking with Leslie at Vayner NFT. And, she's a big proponent and has done a lot to try it, kind of the same rhythm. She's dancing the same rhythm. Like, this is a great opportunity for Web3. Women need to come in. And so she kind of laid out a vision for how events might think through empowering women as speakers. And so let me share her perspective with you, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. So her first step was like, you have to make sure that a woman's on every stage. Okay. And next is like, yeah, make sure that a woman's a part of every panel. More difficult, but I totally get the approach to that. And then she said, and at some point, 50% of all speakers need to be women. Mm-hmm. So if you have 400 speakers, you have 200 guys, and that's it. The rest are women. So I pushed back a little bit on the last one because I think logistically, operationally, it's more difficult to guarantee a 50-50 spread on a stage. And when I said to her, I said, it's easier for me to have half of my interview guests as women because I just kind of fit it in and try to get that diverse collection. But I certainly resonated with like, yeah, every stage needs to have a woman on it. Yes, every panel ideally should have a woman on it. I love the big vision of equality. What's your take on the steps that event coordinators and operators can take in doing a better job with empowering women to have a voice from the stage?
Yeah, good question. And I mean, interestingly enough, like I said, Ian, in the beginning of our interview, when I was reporting in 2017, I would go to events and literally there would be maybe 3 women involved in the entire conference that I would attend. Now I go to events and there's usually always a woman on stage, which is wonderful. I mean, we're seeing the diversity increase as the space develops. And I think, like I said, a large part of that is because of the Web3 development in the NFT space, allowing for creativity and more genders to just be involved. When it comes to planning events, I think I like this natural approach. For instance, you think of a panel, you think of a topic, then you think of the best speakers for that panel, right? And I just think it's so cool that we're seeing this evolution. It's very natural that, oh yeah, Monica Long would be a great person for the panel. Marjorie would be a great person. I would be a great person. There are just women that are just naturally fit for these panels. I think it is important to say, look, we need to have at least one woman on every panel. But what I think is even more important and more cool about what we're seeing now is that it's become a very natural. You don't really have to think about it so much because there are so many women in this space now. It's like, you don't have to think, okay, well, what woman knows a lot about fashion NFTs or Sandbox or Decentraland, because there are so many women out there that are starting to understand and enter the space. So while I think it's important to plan, I also think it's really cool that we're seeing this just like natural evolution and everything is just happening naturally. I mean, I think if there's a panel with all men and it makes sense to have only men on that panel because they're the experts, then so be it. But if there's a panel where it's all women or half women or the majority of women and they're the experts, and that's great too. I think most importantly is the content. That's the most important. What we're seeing now are more women thought leaders to cater to that.
I like your perspective. Thanks for sharing openly. I know that this is not prepared, so you don't know what I'm going to be asking you. Right. I'm going to shift us a little bit to diversity of utility in projects. So we're talking about diversity of leadership, diversity of genders, but how about the utility? Because I know one of the things that you've covered a lot with Cointelegraph, or at least I get the impression that you'll be covering more, is kind of like there's more to an NFT than just a collectability, right? What's the utility around it? So what type of diverse approaches are you currently viewing in the market around utility? And what are some diverse approaches that you'd like to see people consider moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. So that's what's interesting about the NFT space that we're seeing today versus, a few years ago is the utility. And I think the utility behind an NFT is really, really important because there's so much that can be done in terms of engagement. So Ian, I recently wrote an article on Cointelegraph about the future of storytelling and how Web3 development and NFTs are enabling that. So basically, when I was at NFTLA, I connected with Warner Brothers and Palm NFT Studio. They created a collection called the Bat Cow collection, which those are the Batman masks. And basically those are NFTs now. Anybody who owns that kind of becomes a part of this Bat Cow world where they can actually create these stories that will be told using those NFTs that they own. So that's a great form of utility, just storytelling. If you own an NFT, you can become a part of this world that, in terms of comic books, for instance, that NFT can be utilized in future stories. Each NFT is different in terms of the back cow collection. They have different, powers and functions. So the one that you own can kind of tell a different story. So I think that's a great form of utility in terms of like what creators are doing with storytelling and NFTs. Another great form of utility are music NFTs. A lot of musicians right now are launching their own NFTs. And by owning that NFT, that gives the fans access to exclusive events, maybe to one-on-one chat sessions with that artist, tickets for upcoming things. So I think that the utility behind NFTs is really important in terms of Web3 development and what we're seeing now versus just like a beautiful looking NFT that can be bought for a high price and then sold again for a high price. When I look at NFTs, I don't want to see, an NFT and think about the price, because NFTs are so much more than that. There's so much more than a price. There's so much more that can be done with NFTs than just trade them. It's really about the utility. It's really about holding that NFT and invoking a memory. It's like I went to the Dolly Parton conference at South by Southwest and I claimed my free Dolly Parton NFT. Does it have value? I don't know, but I don't really care because it's in my wallet and it reminds me of the Dolly Parton concert. And, maybe one day they'll add some sort of utility to that will allow me to see other Dolly Parton concerts in different venues. So Ian, just, I think that the utility behind NFTs that we're seeing today is much, much more important than just like beautiful looking pieces of art, in my opinion.
It's funny. I just met with Matt from Palm NFT Studio about the Bat Cow project. It wasn't for this, it was something separate. And I just pulled up your article from April 18th. And so I'll go ahead and post that into our comments section on the video. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Anything that you're like leaning into and you're wanting to see in the industry that you don't yet see materializing? Is there something that you're waiting for as a analyst, as a senior reporter for Cointelegraph? Is there something you're like, when are we going to see this or that? What are you kind of anticipating might come that's not yet in our industry?
Yeah. So, it's a good question. There's a lot. I can definitely, that's a long answer, but I'm going to shorten it to what I hope to see in terms of digital fashion NFTs. I'm just going to keep this very, specific to that because I'm very passionate about that. Physical and digitals. So that's we're seeing a little bit of that now, but basically what that means is we see these digital fashion NFTs that can be created by a fashion designer, Tommy Hilfiger, for example, because he participated in Decentraland's Fashion Week. Those clothes can be worn on an avatar, but for instance, it would be super cool to have those clothes as physical objects as well that you can wear in real life. So we're starting to see the rise of physical and digital NFTs in terms of the fashion world. What's really cool is that we're also seeing these shops, actual retail stores open up, and they will sell physical items, physical clothing items that are associated with digital NFTs. So you can go in, buy a shirt, scan a barcode, claim the NFT, put that on your avatar in Decentraland. So basically what I hope to see more of moving forward, now that we're kind of getting out of the pandemic and back into real life, is the convergence of real life in Web3. Like being online and being virtual is great. Having an avatar that's wearing digital fashion NFTs is super cool. But I'm going to go out there in real life and I'm going to want to wear that, fashion NFT in person. So I think just seeing that convergence is what I'm hoping for moving forward now that we're getting back to in-person events.
I love that. Well, here's the final question I'll ask you as we wrap up. What type of stories do you want to tell? And I ask this in this context. There's all these people coming to NFT.NYC, and there's people that are tuned into what's percolating and happening for the next month. If somebody sees our conversation, and they think to themselves, I wonder if Rachel would be interested in what we're doing here or doing there. are there any specific things that you're looking to cover that you're leaning into most? Are there certain types of projects that should reach out to you to try and collaborate on telling a story?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question, Ian. So first of all, I just want to let everybody know that, so I'm not a news writer. I write feature articles. I've been writing feature articles ever since I entered the space in 2017. Basically, that means my articles are about 2,000 words. So what I'm looking for in terms of stories are real world use cases. So how can an NFT be applied in the real world? NFTs for good, for instance, that's obviously super interesting. How NFTs are being used for charitable causes, how they're impacting reality today. So digital fashion NFTs, how that's impacting the real world, how NFTs are making a difference. Also, that's really, really important. And I'm looking for, the larger story, not just a press release that just says, this is what we're doing and this is why we're so special, but the larger story where I can sit down and actually talk to someone and say, okay, you guys have created this project. Why is it important? What problem are you solving? And how is it going to make the world a better place? So in terms of my presence at NFT.NYC, those are the projects I'm going to be looking for and focused on.
And then if somebody connects with you and you decide to do a feature story on them, is there an idea of how much time does that take? Is that multiple interviews, and what's the engagement like? Because I think people are like, okay, great. So she does feature stories, 2,000 words, but maybe you could give some context in terms of expectation around how these things materialize and actually end up on Cointelegraph.
Yeah, sure. So yes, it does. That does involve multiple interviews. So when I write stories, I don't focus on one company, but I think of a theme. So for instance, the Web3 storytelling article, the theme was, how are NFTs being applied for storytelling? So I had a number of companies and people that I spoke with for that article. So that's how I write these feature articles. I think of a central theme like NFTs for good, NFTs for charitable causes. Well, there are multiple projects doing that. So I would be speaking to multiple people, better understanding what they do and tying all of that together into one tidy article that makes sense and can help my audience better understand that topic that I'm focused on. So, and yeah, in terms of time, it usually takes 2 to 3 days, getting all of those interviews, putting it all together. It's like a puzzle. When I write articles, it's very much like a puzzle. You put all the pieces together, and then once you have that, you're just kind of good to go.
All right. You're now the puzzle master.
Yeah.
From senior reporter to puzzle master of Cointelegraph.
Yes.
Rachel, thank you for joining me from Maui. Congratulations on being on the islands. I hope you enjoy your day. For anybody watching this, thank you for your attention. We look forward to seeing you at NFT NYC, June 20th through the 23rd. Rachel, I look forward to seeing you.